Why do you wear that stupid bunny suit?
Why are you wearing that stupid man suit?
Frank, when is this gonna stop?
As soon as you finish this review.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys like that intro. I was talking to my girlfriend recently, and she said she liked my first couple of videos. It's just that she kind of just felt like I wasn't being myself quite as much, and I was like trying to be this like a little bit too serious movie reviewer. So I thought I'd maybe design some ways to have some fun and like just kind of chill out a little bit more with these upcoming reviews. So yeah, no, I figured that'd be a good way to start things off. So in this review, I'm going to be talking about what I currently think is my favorite movie. Now, I think it's probably really hard for a lot of movie reviewers to, or just people in general, to say like, wow, this movie in particular is my favorite, because there's just so much out there. For me in particular, I think my favorite movie has changed at least a few times in my life. But currently, yeah, I think Donnie Darko is probably my favorite movie. And when I first saw it, I think I was 17 or 18. I didn't really get it, and it definitely wasn't close to my favorite movie when I first saw it. It's definitely one of those movies you have to revisit a bunch of times to really appreciate it. So today, yeah, I'm going to just be doing a review of it and talk about why I think it's really great. So to start off, what is this movie about? How do I explain this? Well, at a very basic level, it's about this kid named Donnie Darko, who's played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and he's clearly very troubled. He seems to have some mental health issues. Essentially, in the opening 5 minutes of the movie, we see that he does sleepwalk at night, but we immediately know that there's something else about him. There's something else about his situation that maybe more than just mental health, it may be a bit supernatural as well. With this opening sleepwalk sequence, we also meet Frank, who is a giant bunny rabbit who is essentially calling Donnie out of his room to tell him that the world is going to end in exactly
28 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes, 12 seconds.
Yeah, I got it, Frank. I got it, Frank. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. As Donnie is called out of his house by Frank while he's sleepwalking, a jet engine crashes into Donnie's room. Had Frank not called him out of the house, it would have squished him. I'm not going to go into the whole plot of the entire movie because honestly I really don't want to spoil too much if you haven't seen the film, but I thought just describing the opening scene would set it up pretty well. One thing I really love about this movie is that even though it is very, in a sense, it's very hard to digest on its first viewing, it's really hard to fully understand. Despite the fact that that's true, there's still a few things that about the movie that every viewer can really appreciate on first viewing and kind of view the movie as good, even though if they don't really understand it that well. One of these things is just how the movie is shot and directed. This movie was directed by Richard Kelly, who is not very well known at all, and he's really only known for directing this movie. It's very much a cult classic, and his cult classic in that way. But this movie is set in the 80s, and it really does kind of look like an 80s movie at times. There's a lot of really artsy looking pans and transitions, especially in the school hallway intro that we see about 10-15 minutes into the movie. In this scene in particular, a lot of shots are intentionally sped up because that's actually how a lot of those movies were made at the time. It was kind of trendy, but also it kind of fits into the film's larger themes about time, and time is a relative thing that is hard for us as humans to really understand. There are a lot of scenes where the lighting and the color is just really, really gorgeous, particularly the movie theater scene, which I addressed in my intro, in which Donnie is led by Frank out of the movie theater while he's on a date with Gretchen, and then led to burn down somebody's house, and that also really looks gorgeous. Speaking of Gretchen, Donnie's girlfriend, I really do think that the romance in this movie is handled really, really well. It's very much like an awkward high school relationship, but in the best way possible. It's not something that you look back on and cringe at how you used to approach relationships. It's more something you would look on with nostalgia. Donnie's a very awkward kid in the way he approaches this girl, but it doesn't really come off as cringeworthy because she doesn't seem to mind it that much. She even says that he's weird, and when he's about to walk away from this in shame, she says, "No, that was a compliment." And there are a lot of scenes, especially in the director's cut, that really kind of flesh out this relationship and really kind of deepen it a little bit more. And the movie definitely isn't a romance by any stretch of the imagination, but it's sort of it's a well-done romance that I think serves a larger story, essentially. Now, one aspect of the movie I really like ever since I first saw it was sort of the political commentary that exists within the film. Literally, the first line in the movie is when Donnie's sister says, "I'm voting for Dukakis." There's definitely a lot of commentary about the era of the moral majority. So in the 1980s, when Reagan and George H.W. Bush were in office, and it has characters, especially Patrick Swayze's character, who preach a very anti-sex, anti-drug, anti-fun mindset, essentially. And while the movie has a really satisfying scene in which Donnie actually calls out Patrick Swayze on his bullshit, essentially, and basically just criticizes the moral majority movement, it doesn't just look at this moment purely in, oh, we want to be satisfied by seeing this guy get called out. It also adds the commentary that a lot of people who really preach this kind of, especially religious morality, often have a lot of demons of their own that they don't really release, and that's kind of why they do the things that they do. One other political aspect of this movie that I think is really interesting is actually a reaction to it. So, because this movie was released, I believe, in October of 2001, it didn't really do very well at the box office, and one of the reasons for that is because it's one of the reasons it's at least speculated for that is that this was right after 9/11, and this movie has a plane crash. Even though it's not really a plane crash, and it's definitely not a terrorist attack or a hijacking or anything like that that would directly relate to 9/11, because there's an aspect of a plane crash in the movie, people weren't really looking for that at the time, and so it's speculated that's one reason why it didn't do very well. It's a cult movie. There are a lot of reasons why cult movies don't do that well. Often they just can't market themselves that well. They're just not promoted that well by a larger audience. So I don't really know if that's true, but it's an interesting aspect to think about. So in this part of the video, I don't even know if I'm going to use this put this part in the video or not, but I actually got done filming the video a couple hours ago. But then I realized there's another point that I want to put in the video. Yeah, I'm really good at this, I promise. But no, I wanted to talk about how this movie's fucking hilarious. Like there's a scene, like basically all of Donnie's rebellions are just really funny. Like there's a scene where I think we've all had that one teacher in high school that we just really didn't like, and Donnie tells her off screen to go shove a book up her ass, which is fucking great. And then later we get to see a scene with him and Patrick Swayze where he fully just goes all out on this really, really annoying motivational speaker type character, tells him how wrong he is pretty much, and says he's the Antichrist.
I'm pretty troubled and I'm pretty confused, but I'm afraid, really afraid, but I think you're fucking Antichrist.
Yeah, I don't know. The humor this is not a comedy at all, but the humor in this movie is pretty underrated. I actually went and saw this movie this summer with one of my best friends at an outdoor screening, and the audience was laughing a lot. It was a really great environment, and I hadn't really laughed at the movie that hard before until finally seeing it with an audience. I thought that was great. One thing I have to emphasize when talking about this movie is that it's definitely one of those films that you want to watch the director's cut at some point. Now, I would probably suggest actually watching the theatrical cut first, because it's kind of cool to get the confusion that most people have when they first watch this movie. My girlfriend has only actually seen this movie once, even though I've mentioned a bunch of times that I think it's my favorite. But she was, she I think was a little bit confused after the first viewing, and two, she was really creeped out by Frank the Bunny. I would suggest sometime after you watch the theatrical cut, go back and watch the director's cut, because it really does give you a lot of information about the ending of the movie and about the broader theory of the movie in general that you don't really get from the theatrical cut. There are some hints to it, but it's really a lot more subtle than it is in the director's cut. The director's cut gives you quite a bit of material, especially when it deals with the direct excerpts from the book, the fictional book, the book that's in the movie, The Philosophy of Time Travel. And even though I don't really think this movie has that many big issues, I would say, it's more of just a cautionary note that if you're going into this expecting to be just blown away by just an absolutely great movie, you might not necessarily have that experience at first, because it might just be a little bit confusing, and you might have to give it a few viewings or watch the director's cut to really maybe have any kind of appreciation for it. Now, I wouldn't really be doing this movie justice if I didn't really get into some spoilers and talk about what I think my theory is for what this movie means, what exactly happens at the end of it. Now, I believe in a variation of the popular theory that when the jet engine crashes into Donnie's room and Donnie isn't there, this creates a tangent universe. So a universe that essentially breaks off from the normal universe. There are a lot of excerpts from the philosophy of time travel that suggest to me that this is probably what happens. And when this tangent universe is created, it's Donnie's job to sort of be the superhero, almost be the Christ-like figure, and put the universe back in order. And his way of doing that is ultimately to die, because that's what he was supposed to do in the normal universe, and the fact that he couldn't do that basically caused the tangent universe. That's the basic theory, but there's really a lot more behind that I find super interesting. For example, there's a scene in the director's cut which extends a very small scene from the theatrical cut, where Donnie's dad is talking about somebody who he used to know from school named Frankie Fiedler. Now, this isn't really directly explained, even in the director's cut, but in both cuts of the movie, when they're in the movie theater, Frank mentions that the name Frank comes from his father and his father before him. So because the only time it's ever mentioned that somebody else in the movie is named Frank is that bit in the director's cut, I'm inclined to believe that Frankie Fiedler is Frank's father. And because we know from Donnie's dad that Frankie Fiedler ended up passing away, I'm inclined to believe that Frankie Fiedler, Frank's father, as well as Frank himself, are essentially what's called the manipulated dead. So the movie has a soundtrack that's called Manipulated Living, and this term I think is mentioned in the philosophy of time travel as well. The manipulated living are people who are alive in the tangent universe, who are supposed to guide the living receiver, Donnie, to his path, to reset the universe, essentially. The manipulated dead are people, I think, my theory, is that they can transcend the different universes in which they have died and ones that they're still alive, to serve this same kind of purpose. I think that explains how Donnie is able to see Frank in this tangent universe. But then the question remains, how did he ever see him in the real universe right before the jet engine incident happened? And that's where I think that the idea that he has schizophrenia is valid, because I don't really see how any of the tangent universe stuff can come into play before the jet engine stuff happens. So in short, yes, Donnie does have paranoid schizophrenia, at least in the real universe. But in the tangent universe, there definitely is something else that's going on there. And I think Frank really is somebody he's seeing. He's perhaps one of the manipulated dead that's transcending these different universes to try and get Donnie to his path. There are like a million other theories about this movie, and some of them are really crazy. Like, some of them to me just don't make any sense at all. But I really, really, really love movies like this, where there's just so much debate and so much that you can think about. Every time I watch Donnie Darko, there's something, my mind changes in some way. There's something I see that I didn't see before. And that's not something you can say about a lot of movies. Even a lot of my other favorite movies, yeah, there's things that you can appreciate about the movie, and there's things that keep you coming back to it, how good the story is, how good it looks, etc. But the idea that there's something really important and integral to the story that keeps you coming back over and over again just to figure out what exactly this means, I think is incredible. I think it's a really rare thing in film. So because it's my favorite movie of all time, of course, I'm going to give Donnie Darko an A+. Yeah, I don't think there's a movie I would recommend checking out more than this. I wrote an article about this movie actually for a publication at my university, but I think I had like an 800-word limit, and because of the format, I just really couldn't go in and tell all the details like I really wanted to. And I think I managed to do this in this review. I hope maybe someday I'll come back to this and do like a full analyzed, like Donnie Darko, like everything that I possibly have noticed about this movie. But in general, I think I've told my theory about this movie. I think I've explained why I just love this movie so goddamn much. Anyway, that's my review for Donnie Darko. I'm going to do a lot more of my favorite movie reviews in the future, and I'll probably have some new movie reviews for you guys coming up soon. I'm pretty excited. I would love to go see the new Spider-Man movie in about 2 weeks. I am a massive fan of Spider-Man. I'm not very optimistic about this movie, I have to say, but I would love to see that and review it early enough so you guys can get an idea of it. And yeah, I'll be working on this content soon. Stay tuned. Thanks very much for watching.